death spiral, a phrase coined by the administration referring to Obamacare's uncertain future. Courage of the oppressed. The many victims of communism are remembered and honored. Rome of the West. We explore the rich Catholic roots of the city of St. Louis. And more than a lost and found, St. Anthony, often depicted holding the child Jesus, is a model of sanctity. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Friday, June 12th, 2015. Good evening from Washington. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. It's stumbled along now for about 5 years, but could Obamacare be breathing its last tonight? The administration, faced with a hostile Congress and crucial Supreme Court case, finds itself on the defensive. The president continues to take swipes at Republicans who are trying to repeal his signature health care law.
Once you see millions of people having health care, once you see that all the bad things that were predicted didn't happen, you'd think that it'd be time to move on.
But there's an even bigger threat to Obamacare, the Supreme Court. It's just days away from a decision that could send the law into what the administration calls a death spiral. In the case of King versus Burwell, the High Court could rule that Americans buying coverage on Obamacare's federal exchange are no longer eligible for financial assistance. That means in 34 states, an estimated 6.4 million people could lose insurance after seeing an average premium increase of nearly 300%.
So this should be an easy case. Frankly, it probably shouldn't even been taken up.
Under the Obamacare doomsday scenario, Health and Human Services Secretary Sylvia Burwell says there is no plan B.
You're not going to answer the question, are you?
No, the answer is the problem that gets created is subsidies aren't available. They aren't available for millions of Americans. They lose their insurance.
Republicans in Congress are in no mood to salvage the health care law. They want to scrap it.
Obamacare is just flat busted. It just doesn't work. And no fix can change that fact.
What's busted is not ACA, but your attacks on it.
Just as the court is nearing its decision, the president is trying to spread the word that Obamacare is working, sitting down with the syndicated TV show Extra.
One of the things I always try to remind people of, what we do here, what the Supreme Court does, what Congress does, these are things that really matter in people's lives.
But the White House says this is no PR attempt to influence the justices.
In all likelihood, the decision in this case has already been reached and written.
And the justices are expected to announce their ruling within the next few weeks. Some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. The Polish Prime Minister meets with Pope Francis at the Vatican today. They discuss the papal visit to Poland in 2016, along with global issues, including Ukraine. Despite being a communist state for a large part of the 20th century, Poland has a rich Catholic history. Pope St. John Paul II, a Polish native, is credited with helping bring down the communist regime 25 years ago. And here in Washington today, an annual remembrance of so many who were repressed by communism for decades. Wyatt Goolsby reports tonight from the Victims of Communism Memorial.
Today, the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation honored 2 political dissidents for standing up to hostile regimes. Anatoly Shinchenko grew up in the Soviet Union before moving to New Jersey.
I've lost friends, and my friends, the kids I was playing with at that time, they kept coming to play, sometimes crying. They took their father in the middle of the night. And they used to tell the family at that point, if you go around telling that we took away, tomorrow we'll get you.
Years after communism collapsed, Shinchenko says Russia is still not free.
Representatives from various embassies and other nonprofit organizations laid out dozens of these wreaths in front of the memorial today, many of them recognizing the victims of communism or those who died under communist regimes. In many ways, they say this memorial represents a lesson for the rest of the world.
We believe that the truth shall not only make you free, but it will keep you free.
Dr. Lee Edwards says that's a lesson for citizens as well as world leaders. Edwards cited St. John Paul II as a leader in the fight against communism. There's an opportunity, he says, for Pope Francis to do the same.
Well, I think he has to speak the truth and for human rights, to speak the truth for those people who are still suffering in prisons, so many people around the world. So I would hope that Pope Francis would send a message to all of them.
Many hope the Pope will push that message during his trip to communist Cuba in September. Wyatt Goolsby, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Wyatt. And the House rejects a high-profile trade bill in a humiliating defeat for President Obama. That vote came just hours after Obama went to the Capitol for last-minute lobbying with fellow Democrats. GOP leaders supported the measure, but some other Republicans were unwilling to expand the president's authority. Many Democrats say American workers would suffer.
And this trade agreement is only going to hurt their ability to have a job and to increase their wages.
The trade bill would have given Obama so-called fast-track authority to complete trade deals. Congress could only approve or reject, but not amend those deals. A federal workers union claims the cyber theft of federal employee information is more damaging than it first appeared. Hackers stole personnel data and Social Security numbers for millions of current and former federal workers. Union leaders insist the hackers are now in possession of all personnel data from every federal employee and retiree. The Obama administration had acknowledged the breach, but was very vague about what exactly was taken. A New York prosecutor claims a prison employee gave 2 escaped inmates illegal items. That prosecutor says Joyce Mitchell gave them contraband, but not the power tools used to cut their way out of the prison. Mitchell is not charged at this point. A person close to the case says investigators believe she agreed to drive the getaway car but never showed up. Today marks the 7th day of an intense search for David Sweat and Richard Matt, both convicted killers. U.S. bishops gathered in St. Louis this week for their annual spring meeting. Catherine Szeltner joins us from the so-called Rome of the West with more about that city's rich Catholic history. Catherine?
Brian, in its heyday before the Civil War, this St. Louis riverfront would be filled with steamboats that fueled a growing economy. The city was bustling with pioneers and immigrants from across the globe. And in the center of all that activity was a church. Known to locals as the Old Cathedral, the Basilica of St. Louis King can't be separated from this city's immigrant history.
In here, when they came to worship and pray, there'd be a huge diversity of personalities, of languages, and of understanding of Catholicism.
King St. Louis IX is the city's namesake. He's a model for Catholic monarchs, and Father Richard Coeur says St. Louis is a model for Catholic cities.
The Old Cathedral has always played a major role in our Catholic social teaching to welcome immigrants.
Recently restored, even the cathedral's art tells the story of St. Louis.
My favorite piece of art is the painting of St. Louis IX, and really represents, from day one, the devotion of the city fathers and mothers to the Eucharist.
But as the boating industry lost its steam here, the city center was no longer around the old cathedral. And in the early 1900s, construction on the Cathedral Basilica of St. Louis, or the new cathedral, was complete.
It was decided that there needed to be a grander structure for St. Louis and really for God as well.
The new cathedral hosts the largest mosaic collection in the Western Hemisphere.
The mosaics really are the stories of our faith in visual form.
Nicole Erling works at the new cathedral and says the art draws people into the faith. So from the old and new, this city's Catholic life has both a history and a future. Brian, both the old and new cathedral are active parishes and basilicas, or a special place for prayer. But the new cathedral is the Bishop's Church here in St. Louis.
Right, Catherine Szeltner reporting from St. Louis. Thanks, Catherine. Coming up, the Pope's busy summer travels may include yet another African stop in Kenya. And behind the scenes of the Bishops' Conference, the priestly ministry of these shepherds remains their priority. O Sacred Heart of Jesus, I place my trust in Thee. Whatever may befall me, Lord, though dark the hour may be. A beautiful prayer on this feast of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, June the 12th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick. Pope Francis may add a stop in Kenya on his trip to the Central African Republic and Uganda in November. The Holy Father told a gathering of priests that it's possible but not sure because of organizational issues. The trip will be his first to Africa as Pope. In July, Francis visits 3 South American countries, and then in September, he stops in Cuba on his way to the U.S. It's good to have Father Michael Perry, Minister General of the Order of Friars Minor, or Franciscans, joining us from Rome. And Father, is the appeal of Pope Francis having a positive impact on Franciscan vocations and vocations in general?
I think the answer to that is yes and maybe. I say yes because I think in some regions in Eastern Europe, in parts of Asia and parts of Latin America, we've noticed 2 phenomena. We've noticed an increase, a slight increase in young men expressing an interest to become Franciscans. And another phenomena is some young men who left us in the course of formation experience and who now are asking to come back. This is something which is really new for us to have a number. We've had 20 young men this year who have asked to return. So I think, and they're from Latin America principally, I think there is some effect of the Pope's message, his hope, his joy of the gospel he's bringing to the world. So I think I would say yes, there maybe is, we're still not quite sure the full impact that his message and his life example will give. But we are very hopeful that it is having an impact in the fact that he chose the name from St. Francis of Assisi.
How interesting. Is it strange at all that you have this Jesuit-formed Pope who ties so closely with Franciscans?
And again, that's kind of a yes and a no. Ignatius of Loyola was himself very much drawn to the spirituality of St. Francis and thought about becoming a Franciscan. So maybe it's a continuation of the spiritual experience or spiritual insight that St. Ignatius himself had. But I think on the other hand, Pope Francis' his own personal story of closeness to brothers and sisters who are poor, living their experience, walking with them, riding the buses with them, trying to understand their experience. I think he must have felt, through those experiences, he must have felt a closeness with St. Francis and his own desire to carry the gospel of Jesus Christ and discover the poor Christ among the poor.
The first Pope to take the name Francis. All right, Father Michael Perry, thank you so much for your insight and for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much. Good day to you. Bye.
You too. Bishops from across the world gather at the Vatican next fall. They're going to discuss further the family with Pope Francis. A Wisconsin couple took part in last year's Synod on the family in Rome. They talked with us earlier this week. Alison and Jeffrey Heinzen are joining us from St. Louis, where they addressed the Conference of Catholic Bishops. You were one of 14 couples, the only American couple as part of the Synod on the family in Rome. What was the message you shared with the bishops there?
Essentially, the message we delivered to them was to keep the whole sense of marriage into a simple language, using really their family stories and the stories that they hear from the faithful in their own diocese, to talk about not only the sacrifices that married couples make, but the joy that comes from those sacrifices, the joy of raising children and seeing them come to their own fruition, if you will. We also talked about some simple things that we could do. For instance, at each parish on a monthly basis, to have the couples who are married, say in the month of June, stand up at the end of a Mass and be blessed, so that the people in the pews, if you will, can see that marriage is alive and well, and to thank and congratulate those couples. We talked a bit about the whole sense of
formation before and after marriage, to make sure that our young people really understand the sacrament of matrimony, so that they can be well suited and know that they're answering their vocational call. So we talked about that, and also the need for aftercare resources, because once people are married, just like priests after they become priests and are ordained, they need ongoing support. Well, married couples are the same. We need the church to support us with aftercare resources.
And how has your involvement in such an important process affected your own marriage, your own family?
That's a great question, because we in the process of even preparing our own comments to the United States Conference of Bishops, we put those comments in front of our own children. We have 3 grown children. They're all married. They all have children. And so we put our comments or our presentation in front of them and said, are we addressing what you as young newly marrieds need to have addressed? And Ironically, for once, our oldest said to us, "This is probably the best stuff you've ever done." Now, he's probably our biggest critic, and so we were like, okay.
If we know the struggles, and we also know that we have to be family. So we try hard, even with our hectic schedules, just to be family, not only between Jeff and I, but also with our children.
Keep up the great work. We enjoyed it. Thanks.
All right. Yep,
You're
thank you.
welcome.
And those bishops meeting there in St. Louis had pretty hectic schedules to do at the spring meeting. But our video journalist Mark Irons shows us how the celebration of daily Mass remains at the heart of their ministry.
For convenience, they set up this little room with several altars, so bishops will go in there when their schedule allows to celebrate Mass, because it's our custom, of course, to offer Mass daily. The preference is to be with a large group or with a congregation, but it's still Mass. It is our custom and our privilege and a source of tremendous grace and joy that we celebrate Mass. To celebrate the Eucharist, of course, is the heart of my life. It's the heart of every priest's life. In fact, the Eucharist is truly and should be the heartbeat of every Catholic's life.
Up next, we return to St. Louis to talk with the Archbishop of San Francisco about the church, marriage, and family.
What's a treehouse doing at a shrine in honor of St. Anthony? I'm Jason Calvi. I'll tell you why coming up next.
Only the heart of Christ, who knows the depths of his Father's love, could reveal to us the abyss of his mercy in so simple and beautiful a way. From the Catechism of the Catholic Church on this feast of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, Friday, June 12th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick. Joining us from his very busy schedule at the Conference of Catholic Bishops in St. Louis is Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone of the Archdiocese of San Francisco. Your Excellency, you head the Committee for the Defense of Marriage. Marriage is so misunderstood. How can we defend marriage between a man and a woman without coming across as bigoted or discriminatory?
Well, we support marriage because of the great good marriage does in bringing men and women together, the two great halves of humanity coming together to procreate and raise the next generation of children. So the focus has to be on a family-centered approach, whereby marriage is the only institution we have that connects children to their mothers and fathers. So the basic question is, does society need an institution that connects children to the man and the woman that bring them into the world or not? Is that a good thing for children or not? And if it is a good thing, well, then we have to support marriage, as it's always been understood, as a union of a man and a woman, because it's the only institution that does that.
The U.S. Supreme Court expected to rule this month on a possible redefinition of marriage. How would that affect our society if marriage is indeed legally redefined?
There's some very alarming trends going on already in terms of the decline of people getting married, the decline of interest in marriage, and then now the great marriage divide. It's curious that the people that are getting married and for the better part staying married are the better educated, college graduate and higher socioeconomic levels. The people that are in the lower economic class and even increasingly in the middle class, marriage is becoming more and more of a rarity, with more and more children being born out of wedlock, being disconnected from especially their fathers. And we know from decades of social science research the great importance of the father in the life of his children. So we could see more of these social ills spreading even further with redefinition of marriage in the law, as it's already been redefined in the mindset of a lot of people in the culture.
All right, the chair of the Bishops' Committee on the Defense of Marriage, Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone of San Francisco. Thank you for joining us, Your Excellency.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And of course, that conversation from earlier this week. Meanwhile, violence in the Middle East leaves about 1 million Assyrian Christians refugees since 2003. Those figures come from the Iraqi Christian Relief Council. Juliana Tamarazi is a founder of that council. And what inspired you to begin this effort?
Well, this persecution is nothing new to my nation. It has been going on for 14 centuries. But when the war with Iraq began in 2003 and my people started suffering greatly, I met with Cardinal George and I asked him, what is the Vatican doing to help the persecuted church in Iraq? And He asked me to come in for a meeting, and I couldn't believe a cardinal would ask me to go to a meeting. I did. And after a meeting with the Peace and Justice Office, I came away, them telling me that this is a calling that you have to start this organization to raise awareness among Americans, to tell them that there are Christians in Iraq and who your people are. So for the last 7.5 years, we've been traveling throughout the country. We talk in churches, we raise money, and we support the 2 main organizations on the ground for all the displaced that are truly have lost everything.
And what a powerful personal story you have to tell. You say that martyrdom is part of your ancestry. Explain that.
Yes, unfortunately, or fortunately, however we want to look at it, it's difficult all the way around. 8 members of my family within a 120-year span have died in the name of Christ. My great-grandfather, who became to the States, and he wanted to become a minister when he went back to Iran after he studied here. He died in a camp, World War I. Then his wife, who died along with her 2 sisters. She was raped and killed by the Kurds, simply because she was a Christian. And then moving on to Russia, where my great-grandparents, who remained alive, they went to Russia. My great-grandfather died because he was a priest, and his cross was exposed. So this is something that is a part of our DNA, and it's not only my family. There are about 4.5 million Assyrians, also known as Chaldeans and Syriacs in the world, who have given martyrs. It's just not only my family.
I want to point out a film that you are co-producing with our friend Jason Jones. It's called Sing a Little Louder. What's the premise?
Well, this is a true story of the Jews and others that were being taken to death camps on trains. And the churches that were alongside of these train tracks, they were singing louder and louder as these Jews were crying out for help. And what is happening today, that type of treatment that the Jews and others received during the Holocaust, the church is silent, or it's singing louder to drown out the cries from the East. And we're hoping through this movie that silence will be broken, that we will wake up the church in the West.
I can't wait to see it. We'll have you back again to talk about that a little bit more. Juliana Tamarase, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. God bless you.
Thanks. The church honors one of the most beloved saints of all time tomorrow. Jason Calvi shows us how St. Anthony of Padua still works wonders in the lives of people today.
Many people call on St. Anthony for a special mission: finding lost things.
He found my life for me. I got my life back.
Rosemary Whalen struggled with depression for 60 years. She attributes a miraculous healing to St. Anthony's intercession.
I was no longer getting through things. I was enjoying them. I looked forward to everything. And it was like the world was in color, and it had been in black and white.
Today she's visiting the Shrine of St. Anthony in Maryland. Anthony was born in Portugal in 1195. As a priest, he was inspired by Franciscans and later joined the order.
Anthony went to Francis and said, "Can I please teach theology to the friars, because they're going to slip into heresy if they don't know theology." And Francis is blessing him and said, "Brother Anthony, you can teach as long as you don't extinguish the spirit of prayer and devotion."
So why is a treehouse part of the Shrine of St. Anthony? It's because the saint spent the end of his life living and praying in a treehouse. It also gave him an ideal place to preach to those who flocked to see him.
St. Anthony was known for his preaching and has been called the Wonder Worker. He was canonized a saint just 1 year after his death. Nearly 800 years later, he's still working wonders. Jason Calvi, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Jason. I have to confess, every time I lose my mind, I ask St. Anthony to help me find it. Until Monday, for EWTN News Nightly, I'm Brian Patrick. As we say goodnight tonight, returning to Rome, where the San Lorenzo Chapel, site of the Scala Santa, or Holy Stairs, was recently restored. Good night and God bless you.